If you're building your ABA company and you're tired of guessing, this is for you. We built the EBCBA blueprint to give you real structure, systems, and support without the fluff. Details are in the description.
All right. Hi, I'm Jordan Fries, actually. It's not Fries, but it's spelled like fries. And I usually don't correct people. You know, when they go to like the bank, they're like, thank you, Miss Fries, or whatever. You know, you're just going to meet them briefly. But since I might talk to you again, I figured I would tell you. I'm a BCBA. Actually, I've been in the ABA field for a little bit over 12 years. 10, yeah. So I've been a BCBA for about 7. I've started like working directly with clients in a private school setting. So not really having to do a lot of specific, technology-based, learning or anything. We had IEP, so we had more of like a FERPA kind of, confidentiality with our clients there. And then I moved into working with direct care in-home with some ABA companies, kind of similar to what you guys support. I've worked across a couple of different EMRs and throughout the day, not just CentralReach, Catalyst, WePortal at the time was one, and then helped work with some of my best friend was a co-owner, or sorry, an owner of a company, and I kind of joined her. So starting from the ground up, kind of helping create those policies and procedures. And when you own a business, you have to, and get even credentialed with payers. You have to have proof of what kind of policies you need if there's a breach, if how are you protecting your information? At the time, I remember also a lot of us were still pen and paper. So we would give like a lockbox that you could keep in your car to keep all of the files in there, so it's come a long way. I'm always been a big technology lover and figuring out things and how things work. So now I get to do that with CentralReach and kind of support customers across the board with growing their company, maintaining their company, keeping their company, safe. So today, what I was just going to do is kind of talk through some experiences I've had. Again, like Derek said, or Josh said, like this is not specific to CentralReach. It's across any EMR. Most of them have some very similar functionalities and privacy. So just going to talk through some of that. And if anybody has any questions, just let me know. Anything from you guys before I keep going?
No, we're waiting with bated breath.
Okay. So I want to start with like a story. So with a company, we all hear about external threats such as somebody hacking into my accounts, my bank account, anything, websites, things like that. So making sure that you're using unique passwords. And a lot of you who own a company or work at a company usually have to do yearly HIPAA training. So there's obviously a lot of information around external threats, how to be safe, how to make sure that you're protecting your client's information as well as your employees' information. Like certain states have actually, good employment law as well. So that information also has to be protected. So I'll kind of talk through a little bit of both external and internal risks that might occur when you're using an EMR, or just in general technology. One thing that you have to think of is we all want to trust everybody, and as a BCBA and somebody who wants to help somebody, I always just want to think there's good in everybody and nobody's going to hurt me. Nobody's going to do anything to make me mad, on purpose or intentional. However, that's not always the case, sadly. So for some of those internal threats, things that we want to consider, is I'm going to start with a story that I've had from one of my colleagues and some of the people that I've heard about in the ABA company. Often when you work with a company, You might not get a work-related or a work-assigned laptop. You might not get a personal, or you might have to use your personal devices. This can always be a risk. For example, if you're using your own computer, even if you use a protected business Google account, they can download stuff to their computer. They can save that information, not necessarily maliciously, but they could still save that information into their computers, and that could be a risk if the computer gets stolen, things like that. So just keep in mind, one thing is devices. You know, what's on that device? Should you be using a personal device versus a company device? If you're using a personal device or company device, what kind of security do you have on that device? Can the IT team log in and check things? Do you have multi-factor authentication set up for, you know, some platforms? CentralReach does have that capacity. You don't have to have it turned on, but some will turn it on and require that. So there are things you can set up to make sure that at least what those devices are doing are a little bit safer. Another thing is with those files and information on devices is accounts and what access do you have to your accounts. So one thing that I talked to about at what they were talking about for the conference was just permission-based visibility. So when you're using an account, no matter what the EMR, a lot of times you have different access based on your role. And so we really just try to recommend making sure whatever role you have throughout your company, identifying like the least amount of permissions they need to complete their job. If they do not need to see client information because they are going in and adding employees for HR every month, then don't have them access client information. If they are an RPT and they are just going in and collecting data, don't have them access employee files or even billing information. And some of these things, unfortunately, can be just a slip of a button where you give access to somebody and you might not know that. So there's just a lot of not necessarily, you know, ways to, it's going to happen, things will happen. So that's why you have to be a little bit more on top of auditing and making sure things are set up to your system, so that way you can at least trust that you know you've protected certain information from those employees. There are certain resources, I'm not sure about certain EMRs, but some can help you identify who has what permissions, and that way you can kind of maybe on a quarterly base review who has access to what based on a permission level or based on a group of employees that are designed to do certain things. So I recommend just kind of keeping that in mind throughout, like every day. No, you don't need to check that, but you know, those are things that are going to come up, and if you get audited or something like that, those things that they could be a risk. And I see that a lot actually within my company, is just not knowing what they have access to. So it is a little bit more work to make sure that you're a little bit more on top of that. Another thing that you also want to look at is understanding what permissions can do certain things. Like, you know, are you giving them the ability to download? Can you turn that off if you don't want them to be able to download things? Are you giving them the ability to add new information or delete information? Certain things might not be able to be recovered. So, you know, understanding what those permissions also for that role and what kind of guidelines around that, even if you have to give those permissions, is important. So if I have to give Derek access to my billing screen or anything billing information related to just looking at my finances, does he actually need to do anything in there, or does he just need to look? Does he act like, you know, look at numbers? Does he need to void? Does he need to make a payment? Things can happen on accident, and if certain things might not be able to be recovered, now there's a lot of undos certain places, and sometimes it gets stored somewhere else. But just thinking of that, like when you have access to something, understanding what that access means and what cautions you should have. Recently, I've done mistakes, not necessarily related to security, but like, you know, creating content instead of copying something, you edit it. And so now the original is not the copy. And so I've made a mistake doing things like that, even though I had the permission. It can happen. And again, it's not always malicious, but it could hurt you. Another thing is keeping in mind certain accesses related to the status of the employee, contractors versus, are they able to see each other's rates? Are they able to see what your billing insurance is? If I was a BCBA, I might not understand a lot of billing lingo and why it's done. Like if I saw that somebody is billing $50 an hour, but I'm only getting paid $12 an hour, for me right away, if I'm a young BCBA, I'm like, what? No, you need to be paying me closer to $25 an hour. So things like that. And if they are having to see that, have that conversation so that way they're not gossiping, they're not, causing more issues than needed, and they understand why things have to be done that way. So there's a little bit also transparency around those permissions and what access they have. And asking questions doesn't hurt, and answering them doesn't hurt. Just it helps maybe protect it in the future. One thing also sometimes I'll see is with onboarding and offboarding, it's important. Onboarding, maybe you use an EMR as a CRM, like you're also adding staff that you might not have hired yet, but you want them in the platform so that you can look at their application. You might have a status on them saying don't hire again, or things like that. One thing that I know CentralReach has, maybe other platforms have, is you can add people without giving them a login access. So when you're adding them, maybe they're a user, but not necessarily given that SSO connection, so that they can't log in until you choose to make them an employee. This is a good way to make sure, even with offboarding, if you're not ready to completely inactivate them, remove their access, so that way they can't log in after their end date. So there are ways that you have to think about that. Going back to kind of what I was talking about, not being malicious, sometimes we don't know and we can't trust. So I have a story where I know a colleague that was terminated from a company, an ABA company, used an EMR platform, did not leave on the best terms. She reached out, and did everything, when she had to leave her office, she said she was watched. She had to bring, her stuff from her office to her car, all of that, we get that. But she mentioned something to me that I thought was very shocking, but also a good lesson. Is she had gone on to the EMR for something to check. She was like, I'm curious, because she actually had a lot of permissions with that account. So she had almost like access to the admin, all of the billing, all of the HR, and it was for a couple accounts because they were in multiple states. And she was able to log in like 3 months later, being terminated, fired actually. So she did not have a good taste in her mouth around this company. And she could log in and see all of their billing. She could change, she didn't, but she was kind of shocked. And I think she just, being a larger company, like they would, things get missed, but a larger, you would think that after being terminated, not necessarily just somebody quitting, but actually being fired and somebody watching you leave the office, they would have been immediately ending that access to that account. So that way you cannot access it anymore. If she was a person and really wanted to make them regret firing her, she could have messed up their billing. She could have changed all their rates. She could have deleted things. She could have done anything in that account that would have maybe even definitely put them out of business. And so those are the things that, again, you don't want to think that somebody would do. But people hold grudges, and obviously she might not ever get into another ABA company if there might be legal action, who knows? But at that time, no matter what, terminate those employees. If you're terminating those employees, remove access. Derek, I see you went off mic. Do you have a question?
Yeah,
comment?
if she had logged in there, like two things happened that a lot of people don't know. They just want to see, like, oh, can I still log in or
Yeah.
whatever. That's actually considered a data breach for the company, and a potential of improper access is a data breach. Like if the company was notified of that, they would have to go into a full
Okay.
lockdown mode and notify everybody. It's kind of a big deal. I mean, you're talking about, notifications to the Office of Civil Rights for HIPAA, IC3 with the FBI. Like, those are all the things that you have to do. I know Kiro's probably got some more to say about that.
Well, actually, curious, before you go on, is she actually emailed them and let them know, because she was a decent person. She emailed them and said, hey, you might want to deactivate me. I can still access these accounts. So go ahead, Kira. I'm here. I actually did not know that. So that's kind of
happens all the time too.
Yeah, the email was deactivated. That's normal. But like, multiple access to, she could have poached clients. She could have, poached employees if she was, starting her own business and gone back in. Like, so now I'm starting. Like, if she didn't tell them that she had access and said, okay, I'm going to start my own company, and then I'm going to log in and see what they're charging. There's so many things, and it kind of, after hearing that, it definitely, not necessarily, focusing on just those external threats, is that internal, like what's going on within your own company, kind of gets a little scary as well. And so those, like you said, those offboarding, I like that idea, like that offboarding checklist. And we recommend that with when I work with customers, just in general. There's certain steps that you want to make sure that are done before they fully offboard. If they need to sign notes, if they, obviously if they're terminated that day, some things might not get done. But like how long, if they're leaving, like, can we keep access so that they can sign these notes before we can bill them out? There are certain things, or maybe they come to the office and do it, and you do it together. So just kind of understanding, like you said, the different levels of, is it a termination versus a quit, and maybe you change your policies around that. But sometimes they do need to have access, or making sure that you get everything done before that end date if you know ahead of time. And there's always, with certain EMRs, there's always the ability to reactivate, if you need to. Like, so you're not just, it shouldn't be worth the security risk. Now, of course, I know some EMRs pay by seats, things like that. There might be some financial, but like, okay, am I going to pay $50, or am I going to have a lawsuit or lose my business? I know then that month you might be stretched, but again, thinking about overall who I have to contact if something happened, like you said, Derek. So that was something that I thought, again, that really kind of made me realize that it's very important to make sure your internal processes are steady, not just with checking your permissions of your current employees, but making sure offboarding is great. And also kind of keeping in mind when you are working with those employees, I think, one thing that I've noticed is some companies have more trust and will just give access, or somebody needs to do one thing, and so they'll turn on a permission but never turn it back off. So that's another good idea, like, thing. Or maybe it's easier for somebody to do it other than yourself because you're busy, so you'll just give them permission, but you don't realize what that permission just did, like, or you forget to go turn it off. So there's ways around that as well. And so with certain EMRs, you can, make sure that they're in a specific group just for a specific one permission, and then you can audit just that one group, so who has access. And then once that action is done, make sure they're removed from that group. So there always should be 0 people in that group unless there's a current one person doing an action. So that's one idea that I think is great, is just really keeping an eye on those permissions. Another thing that I think, and this can all, I think, be a part of that onboarding training a little bit too, and making sure like your different levels of staff know why those permissions are important, or or who's managing those permissions, if somebody has multiple access, or even connections with clients, understanding like if you're a BCBA and you're in charge of doing all of this, understanding that's part of my role. And that's why I'm doing it, but that doesn't mean I can do it whenever somebody asks me to do it for them. I have to get approval or things like that. So having, what I recommend also is not necessarily just having your standing operating procedures for outside of CentralReach or outside of any other EMR, is having them within CentralReach as well. So we have some checklists, but I recommend like making sure that you have those checklists that are role-based, but also perform a specific job-based, maybe, or audit-based, certain things that you have that you're incorporating those policies and procedures as a part of your day-to-day. I'm trying to think. So another thing that we had mentioned, so those internal threats, but also external, and us being part of a software company, I've learned a lot more about external threats and risk. I've always gotten spam emails on my personal email. I've always gotten, and I've accidentally clicked on things. So far in my history, I've never had anything bad happen to me, but that doesn't mean, that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. One thing that I thought might be helpful for some orgs or companies that as they grow is not necessarily just doing a HIPAA training, but maybe a security training. So I have to do that yearly, understanding not just about like a HIPAA, but what can happen, what kind of actions you do, where you do them. Are you taking your computer to Wi-Fi at Starbucks? Are you using the airport Wi-Fi? Like, what kind of things are you doing? Are you forwarding emails that have links? Are you getting emails and not doing anything with it? So like having like an idea of what kind of things you could prepare your staff for that might happen. Josh, did you have a question?
Yeah, so we had a question in the chat. Do we have a checklist already established for each role in a company within CR?
This is something that I would say that you could work on, because with your CentralReach representative or somebody at CentralReach specific to your company, because I see lots of we work with companies of all different sizes, companies that are 4,000 users to companies that are 20 users, so different roles might change. And especially for a growing company, we also see that checklist actually will change over time as you get more departments and more people that are wearing less hats. So then you might actually start to remove those permissions because they might not need them anymore. So that's why also that's a good point, is if somebody is transitioning to another position or having to do less work, then also updating their permissions so that they're not needing to access certain things anymore. So we don't have any best practices for with CentralReach specifically. There are some role-based groups that are preset when you first start with CentralReach as a standard. But I really recommend working with somebody to identify the roles within your company and what they do. I've had some BCBAs that actually do a lot of stuff with billing, and that's great. But I've had some that should never even look at billing. So just because they're a BCBA doesn't mean they should be limited to certain things. It's just more of within that company. Good question.
So just jumping in there a little bit, Jordan, when business owners ask me about, well, do you have like a kind of a guide or a checklist for this? Some things we can make a guide for, some things we can make checklists for, but, there is a place to develop out, the roles of your business, who is doing what. There is a place to establish how you handle different things within your company, from, who's allowed to have the alarm code to the building to, who has a company cell phone, or who's allowed to use their personal cell phone, like those kinds of things. And that place is your company policy.
Right. And
those policies must be established before anything else can really be implemented effectively. So so I have like a few litmus tests when I talk to my a prospective person who's wanting to find out what they need to do to get closer to compliance or get secure. They want to get, cyber liability insurance, but, they need to check the boxes before they're, they can actually file a claim for anything. So they have things they need to do first, that kind of stuff. And I'll usually ask them a couple questions. Number one is what's your incident response plan?
Yeah.
If you don't know the answer to that question, you don't have any compliance. Like you're non-compliant, right?
Yeah.
Well, what policies do you have in your WISP or your written information security program? If you don't have that, you're not compliant. These are things that are required by the Office of Civil Rights to be HIPAA
Right.
compliant, right? So when we're first working with a new client, the first thing we do is establish those policies. Give us your existing policies. Let's fill in the blanks on the stuff that needs to be added, right? You mentioned BYOD. That's one of our big pinch points, right? Like, the owner will say, no, nobody's allowed to use their private phones or anything, except for email. They can do email, right? And except for my daughter, she does some billing stuff for me sometimes. I'm like, no, that needs to be in your policy. Like, you need to have that role developed, and which roles are allowed to do what. So having that all kind of laid out on paper, so to speak, like where you can kind of visually see this is what these people are going to be doing on our team. This is a roles-based organization. That's how we run our company, is roles-based. It's not a title. It's not, here's the person, these are their responsibilities. They get a title, but they're serving those specific roles within the company. Right. They might wear, we're a small team. We have a bunch of different hats. We all wear, right? But when you're looking at you bring in an employee, and this is going back to the question on the chat, but when you bring in an employee, if you don't have a defined job description, if you don't have a defined role, what their duties are, what their responsibilities are, there really isn't a way for us to go in and set the permissions correctly for them. Right. So if you want your data safe, if you want your systems to be secure, and you want to be compliant, right, which we all need to be compliant, you first need to establish what that person is, who they are, what they're doing, and then build your permissions around that person. And that's where you reach out to your CentralReach rep and say, okay, this is the person, this is what I need. And then getting back to the least access, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because it's least access is a more modern concept in IT. It used to be, how much do we trust this person? Okay, they can have access to all this. Now it's okay, my daughter's going to come work at the front desk. She needs to have access to the schedule, and that's it. But you know what? I trust her. She can have access to everything. I'm not worried about it. The problem is that when she gets hacked, whoever hacks her has access to everything. So even me personally, as the CEO, I don't have access with my regular log on that I use every day. My Derek @ email address, when I log into Microsoft, I have basic end user privileges. We have a break glass if needed, admin login that we can use, right? And every owner of every business should have that. But even you as the owner, you can't trust yourself, because somebody could step into your shoes quite easily and have access to everything that you have access to. So defining that role, making sure that even you as the owner have that small box that you're working within, in case somebody else gets in that box. Got to be concerned with what's in there, right? There was that, and there's another one I had too. Oh, and the client responsibility matrix. I always, anytime I'm working with anybody in any software as a service application, I always want to talk about what we call the client responsibility matrix, right? So CentralReach has this airtight, rock solid safe, this vault that they're keeping our client data in, our employee data, our client data, all of it, right? So if CentralReach builds me this safe, and then I write the combination down and I leave it on a Post-it note underneath my keyboard, the safe isn't going to do any good. No. So just assuming that all your stuff is on CentralReach and CentralReach is keeping it safe, that's absolutely true. But in one way, it's really not, because it's only as safe as you are keeping it. So as the business owner, you got to remember, just because you don't own the server, you still own the information. Right. Just because you don't own your employee's phone that they're using, you still own that risk. Just because you don't own, you're going to laugh when I say this, but just because they're using their personal email address to log into CentralReach, that's still your responsibility. The onus comes back on us, the business owner. So Permissions. Pay attention to it.
And I like how you said the role-based, and also because often what I see is a specific person-based responsibility. And then people, when that person leaves, are out of luck. They have no idea what that person had responsibilities for or why they did things. And I see this often in companies. So I really try to, and I like where you're starting is like really just say, no, not person-based. Now that one person can be, or it can change if that person leaves and you separate, but you still need to know all what that person did. So that way, if so-and-so happens or gets in a car accident or, like you still need to run your business and your account. And if they don't know how to do anything and you have somebody who doesn't know the product very well or any EMR really well, they're more at risk also for making those non-malicious mistakes in edits or errors. And then that could also cause more problems and risks down the line as well.
It comes back to burnout too. Like if your employees have like solidly defined roles, they know exactly what they're doing, they know exactly what's expected of them the day they walk in the door. These are the core competencies. This is what you know. This is what we need you to do, and these are your ongoing responsibilities. Well, that gives them actually a lot of freedom for their own creativity. There's a lot of things they have to do every day. They don't really have to think about, right? Like doing their regular daily grind stuff, right? But they can also step a little bit up forward from where they are positioned in the company and do extra, more creative things and kind of go above and beyond, right? Well, above and beyond what? Above and beyond your responsibilities and your documented roles, right? So yeah, I'm kind of a work addict too. So I think we had another question in the chat. Here, let me pull up the chat. How about using Outlook email? Can we email referral with patient information? Okay, so you want me to take this one, Jordan?
Oh, yes, please.
So I actually just posted a video on the group. I think it was yesterday. All my days are running together, but about
yesterday.
It was okay, and it was specifically about this, Rebecca. So thank you for asking that question. How to send emails in Outlook encrypted. Number one, why you want to send emails encrypted, and last, number 3 is why you don't want to use Microsoft's built-in encryption.
Oh,
we don't recommend it. Okay, so using Outlook email is good. Outlook has free emails where you can just sign up with Microsoft.
So similar what Derek was saying is even us, like if you're emailing somebody, you don't know what security they have on their email. So if they respond to your email, and you have confidential information, even though you might be like 100% sure that you're protected or whatever, if they respond to that email, that transmission back and you don't know what their security risks are, can also more likely for a breach. And like I said, with working with certain companies and if you get certain business packages like with Google Business or Apple Business, I heard now is one thing, some of them might say that they have certain protection. That doesn't mean you're not going to get phishing or spam or anything like that. So you still have to be careful about what kind of emails you're clicking on, and what information you're sharing on your email. Are you back, Derek?
Yes, so my internet went out, so I'm just jumping on my phone here. So back to what Rebecca was asking was, Outlook has free emails. You do not want to use those. You cannot put the proper security measures on them. It's not going to be something you want to use to communicate really anything. And the reason I say communicate anything is because you're going to slip up. You're going to accidentally send something that is a protected information at some point. It's going to happen just by mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And along those lines is why we recommend using, a third-party encryption email security. Like we use Proofpoint, and we change from time to time with our tools. We're very agnostic about what tools we're using. We just want to find the best thing and use that. But when you're sending out an encrypted email, you can forget right? Or you can not think about, what information you're really putting in the email. Having a second safety net there, as far as having a tool that's looking at your email for you and kind of making that decision, like, is this sensitive? Yeah, probably. And it automatically encrypts it for you.
Oh.
Definitely something that I recommend, because staying on top of what you're doing and what all your employees are doing, it's impossible to make sure that all your emails are going out encrypted. So and then the second part of that is your Microsoft 365 it's also a Microsoft tool. So some people use those two terms interchangeably, Rebecca, and I'm not sure if you're talking about Microsoft 365 or the free Outlook emails. As far as Microsoft 365 goes, yes, you can be compliant with Microsoft 365. Oh yeah, it was 365. So you can be compliant with Microsoft 365. We have to be very careful about a couple of things. Number one, setting it up properly, using the correct licenses, getting your certificates in place for encryption if you are going to use that encryption that's built into it. A lot of people just set up, the $8 exchange license or the $12 business standard license or whatever, and they're, hey, Microsoft 365 is HIPAA compliant, we're good to go. There's a lot of stuff you have to do inside there. Our next video that's going up on the our next kind of how-to video that's going up on the group, it's getting edited right now, is me again, basically talking about how to check your Microsoft security score, specifically in Microsoft 5. And yes, like Josh says, I am happy to always do free email consults for anybody in the group. So if you want to be sure about your email, we can do a remote session and make sure that your email is either secure or you're on your way to getting it secure and you know what to do. So those are like really good questions. So thanks, Rebecca. So one of the things too that was actually CentralReach related. So part of my video series in the last couple of weeks has been about this, but we had an ABA company, a couple centers that one under one company, and the owner went on a trip for Thanksgiving. This is the week of Thanksgiving. She's out of town. She gets an email, and it's from her lawyer. So her lawyer had sent her an email, and it's an attachment with some motion that he's about to make. And this is like related to their case, right? So one of the things that we had to deal with that particular scenario was the fact that we had the owner who, she can have access to anything she wants, right? So she had access to a couple of very important files, because they were in the process of moving from CentralReach, from Rethink rather, to CentralReach. So on her personal computer, she had like lists of everybody's passwords for CentralReach. She had all that. Now this person had multi-factor authentication set up on her Outlook, had a few of the security standards in place, but not up to what is really recommended. So when they when she's trying to open this attachment that her lawyer purportedly sent her, it was actually coming from the hackers who had taken down her lawyer's network, right? So she's opening this attachment, and it's installing a remote access Trojan, so the hacker have access to her local computer and bypassed all of her multi-factor authentication, got right past all of her, her email passwords and everything. They logged all of her keywords, got all of her passwords, and just got right in. Now the FBI is involved. It's a whole nightmare. So your email is basically the keys to the castle. So, if somebody hacks your email, they're, a few steps closer to, stealing your CentralReach, getting into your CentralReach. So.
Yeah, and just one more thing before I go, specific to CentralReach, one thing that actually we're launching next month is a new managed connections process that is going to help auditing your connections between your clients and your employees, so that way you can see who's connected to what and make those changes a little bit easier, so that way you can kind of stay on top of that. So we're also working on making sure that you have the easier access to, like I said, audit and also change things within the account.
And before you go, I just want to ask you one last question. What made you choose ABA like 10, 12 years ago?
That's a good question. Actually, I was in high school and I was a lifeguard and I started doing swimming lessons. And we worked on this swimming lessons group with children with special needs. I ended up getting a boy, an autistic boy, and that was the first kind of relationship I've had with anybody that was diagnosed with autism. And I learned a little bit about it from his mom, and I just was very interested. And so I go to college, study, health, and then I go into an abnormal psychology class, and I learned about autism a little bit more and ABA therapy. And I was like, oh, well, this is awesome. This makes sense to me. And so actually I started undergrad and hopped right in and did an internship at a school, and really just started really liking how people can be like behavior can be under misunderstanding, and it's more of a form of communication, not necessarily an intention of harm or frustration. I mean, so it's just something that I really like to be able to help support, families, not just the individuals that we worked with, but also families, because a lot of stress and a lot comes apart, like the whole family is impacted. So, and then I've been, loving to working with clients, but 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago, since I had that technology love, then I used to work with a company that used CentralReach. I kind of fell in love with the platform and learning more about the features and functionalities and how it supports a business. And so now I really like supporting business from the other side, like really trying to make sure that they're one less thing to worry about so they can focus on their employees and clients. So if I can help solve workflows and make things easier so they can save time and get more clients or save more money and things like that, that's my goal. And I really like to see how my companies grow that I work with.
I was gonna say I love hearing how everybody got into ABA.
Yeah.
It's always different, but they're always like really cool. Like that's one of my favorite things about being part of this group. And well, I mean, starting the group and then also being a part of it and having conversations with everybody is just like learning like what got people into it in the first place. Because like the way that we found it was very different than how any of the behavior therapists or BCBAs are finding it, because it's not how we got into it, but we're in it now. So it's
actually, I don't know, Josh, how'd you guys get into it? Actually, I don't know that.
So the way that we got into it was Derek actually has a few nephews that have benefited from ABA therapy. So that's how he knew about ABA. Locally, there were a couple of companies that they provided ABA therapy, and so they needed cybersecurity, IT compliance, and so we went in and did that. In doing so, we become very like intertwined with all the different areas of running the business, because of how technology is used for pretty much everything, and it can either be your worst nightmare or like if it's not set up properly, or it can make your life really easy. And our main goal is helping people get home in time for their to have dinner with their families. Like that. Like if people ask what we do, and like we can talk about like all the security and the
Right.
IT and make it all, but like really at the end of the day, what we do is we help people get home in time to have dinner with their families, so that they're not stuck at the office messing with their technology or worrying about their internet going down tomorrow and wondering what's going to happen. They have that kind of like peace of mind when we're dealing with them. So by being the technology management solution for these companies, we've met different software providers, business consultants, different services that also service ABA but don't offer anywhere near the same services that we do, like finances, operations, all the different areas. And so we take advantage of a worldwide IT peer group, and of all places, it's on Facebook. And there's people at all different levels, all different experience levels. There's vendors, there's consultants, marketing and sales coaches, like you name it, they're in the group. And so I thought like it would be really cool to like replicate this same kind of thing that we have for IT and cybersecurity and make it for ABA.
Yeah.
And so that's that was like the whole purpose of the ABA group. Now we're at like we're 1,825 members now.
Wow.
Like, and I actually, when we met at at the CR Unite, there were only like 20 people in the group. And so it just like blew up, and it's pretty cool. And people like in the group now, they're like, hey, I'm looking for RBTs in Austin, Texas, or what do I like, how do I handle billing and credentialing? And like watching all the posts, like I'm actually learning a ton about,
Yeah.
you know, the problem, not just the problems that they're experiencing, but like also just, you know, being able to speak the language. And that way, because like we offer cybersecurity and IT to like all different types of industries, but we've taken a strong focus in ABA. So like how we speak the language and
Right.
explain it to them, you know, why this stuff is important, how it makes their life easier, and why they need it is very different than how we would explain it to a company that has a Department of Defense contract and they manufacture and 3D print things for the Navy. Like it's just completely different. So, but a lot of it's the same. It's just the way you talk about it is different, and being able to speak the language, like the Facebook group has made that really easy. And then just getting to know everybody. Like I've met a couple interesting people, like, you know, the one guy that we did the Q&A session with from John Deere. You know, he left the therapy side of things because his needs weren't being met, as far as like an employee. And so, you know, he experienced that burnout. And so so the reason why we had him on is like, well, what can employers do to prevent that burnout? Like why did you go choose to work for John Deere and use your experience in ABA for user experience research instead of providing therapy? Because he enjoyed providing the therapy. It was just, there was, you know, from what he said there, you know, there's a bunch of different issues that happen there. Like, you know, there was no growth allowed, you know, like there are a bunch of different things he talked about, but like the burnout is real. And you know, he picked a different industry because of that.
Oh yeah. And we've right now actually we have some generative AI initiatives, and so just stay in tune kind of what we're doing. And with our RBT training course too, we have what we call Carrie, and she can help study for the RBT exam, so you can ask her questions. And so I think that's another great avenue for you guys as well. And I'm sure you'll have more business related to, you know, security around AI and what not to, you know, making sure you're trusting, you know, certain things. So I'm excited to continue. I've learned a lot today actually from you guys as well. So I will be keeping in touch and making sure that we keep this partnership.
Yeah, I appreciate you being on here. It was really nice doing this.
Great. Well, everybody have a great week.
You're already doing the work, investing your time, your energy, and your vision. So let's make it count. Build something that works without breaking you. The EBCBA Blueprint is the way. Get started for free with our foundation course.